All right. Welcome to everybody joining us today. We're happy to have you. Today we will be talking about computer programming, and we're talking with Miss Hayley Call. She's a security software engineer for Microsoft, and she's here to share with you a little bit about her job. Don't forget that your surveys at the end of this will be in the description for the video, and this will be mentioned again at the end. But let's ask her a little bit about what her job is and what it's like.
Hi everyone, nice to be here. Really excited to talk with you all and kind of share a little bit about what I do.
Okay. Can you tell us what your job is, just a general description about it?
Yeah, so I am a security software engineer for Microsoft. So generally I do mostly computer programming. So I kind of use my skills in being able to program different software as well as kind of research into different types of software as well as hardware. And I look at the security aspects of that software and hardware to look for kind of vulnerabilities in those programs to see if there's any fixes that I can make or any programs or tools I can make to help the developers of that software make that software even more up to date and more secure. And I build tools and kind of prepare developers to make their programs and their software and their hardware as secure as I possibly can. And I mostly work with low-level software and hardware, so kind of getting into the weeds of programming languages and different types of tools and systems.
Wow, that's very cool. So does your job give you a lot of excitement? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, so I think what's really cool about this job is I get to learn something new every day. And I think with most jobs, you kind of have to have a certain level of knowledge about what you're doing. But I think with specifically with programming and especially with security, the field changes all the time. So you have to kind of be researching the new up-to-date kind of security things that are happening in the space and what's happening with different tools and different programs in the security space, as well as the general kind of computer programming space. And so I really have to keep up to date with everything going on. I kind of have to follow the news with, new security research that's going on. And so I get to learn so many different things, and everyone that I work with kind of got their own little niche. So I get to learn from them. And I'm relatively new at my field. So I'm 1 year in full time. And so I get to learn about a lot of different topics in security. There's a lot of different aspects of security. And so I feel like I'm always learning something new and I'm getting to find different things that I'm interested in. And so I think it's a great place if you really aren't sure exactly what's a cool aspect about computers, or just you really like to learn, you always like to be kind of challenged. I think it's really exciting in that aspect, is you're always doing something new.
How did you get interested in computers?
Yeah, so I really like telling this story. So in middle school, I actually, there was this online platform called Neopets where you got to take care of your own little pet. I don't think it's still around, but it used to be all the buzz. And you could have your own little website for your pet, and you could write your own little code for your pet web page. And so they gave you your own website, and you could change the code a little bit to make it nicer. And then people could visit your pet web page. So you could change it however you want. And that's kind of how I got into oh, you can actually change things on the website to however you want it. And that's kind of how I got into programming. And I didn't really know that was a career you could do. And so I didn't know what it was until I got to college. And I actually entered college as a biology major, thinking I wanted to be a veterinarian. And then I did research in a lab and didn't really like it. And then I kind of changed my mind. I met somebody who was doing programming as their major. They were a computer science major, and they just seemed really interested in it. And they were like, yeah, you get to change your assignments all the time. You get to work with a computer. You get to make stuff. You get to make websites, all these things. And I was like, oh yeah, I used to do that all the time back in middle school. So I got really interested, and I switched in, and I just really liked it. And you just get to make a lot of things, and you get to immediately see kind of the results of what you're doing, because that's kind of what programming is. You get to kind of type something in your computer and you immediately see what you just did. And I think that's the really cool part of it. And so kind of learning from Neopets, I guess, was how I first got into it. And then meeting people who did that in college is how I got into it. And then I kind of just took classes in that, and that kind of led me into security.
That's awesome. What type of talents does your job take?
Yeah, so as I was kind of mentioning earlier, I think every kind of job, you have to have a certain like skill set that you learn, just like math, science, English, anything that you're already learning. You have to know some basic level, some foundation, and it's the same with computer programming and with security programming. But I think with computer engineering specifically, you have to know a bit about how a computer works, especially with what I do, which is security. And as I mentioned earlier, I do kind of more the low-level stuff. So I do more of like the system programming stuff. So that basically just means I do more of like the deep level, like what the computer actually needs to know, like what the computer reads, how the computer sees a program, rather than kind of more of the website, what you as a person sees, if that kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so from my perspective, you have to know a little bit about what the computer, how they see the world, how the computer works. And then I think you have to know a little bit about how a human interacts with the computer. So kind of like how a user uses a computer, how they see a website, what are they going to be doing with the computer. If you want to make something secure, you have to know, well, how are they going to be interacting with something? Are they going to hit something that might create, a vulnerability, might create a problem? So you might want to know a little bit about that. And so I think that kind of just takes the ability to be curious. So the ability to kind of investigate how you might use a program, how you might use a computer. So yeah, I would say curiosity is a big thing. I think that's what led me into computer science, was being curious with creating my little Neopets webpage, and then being kind of curious with creating programs. And so I think curiosity really goes a long way with computer programming. I'd say most of the people I met in computer science, they got into computer science because they were just like, computers are cool. I kind of like messing around on a computer, and they kind of just fell into it. And then I would say math and science are kind of the two fields that kind of play really well in some computer science. So I'd say like having a good foundation with some of the principles like the scientific method, and then just having like a good foundation in basic math is probably important, probably make it a little easier to write programs. And then I think the biggest thing is kind of having like a logic mindset. So like logical reasoning, kind of like how in algebra, you start to get letters involved in algebra, and then numbers and letters, and it kind of takes like a certain sort of mindset to have like the logic that comes with it. I think if you're good at that, computer science will come a lot easier. Or if you can learn the things that it takes to become good at that, then computer science will be a lot easier. So I'd say curiosity, kind of the logic that comes with math and science, I'd say will really prepare you for computer science. But ultimately, I think absolutely anyone can do computer science. I think it's one of the easiest things to learn on your own, because there are so many resources online. In computer science, you just need a computer. That's all you need to do it. My job is I'm just on the computer, right? You don't need, thousands of dollars. You don't need to be in a lab. You just need a computer. And there's like so many videos and courses online for free that you can use. And so I think like anyone can learn it, and the like actual knowledge that you need, and like anyone can learn that stuff. I just say that there are foundational skills that you might be better at computer science if you have those foundational things like logic, curiosity, those sorts of things.
I agree. And we're always hearing about computer science in the news. I always hear it from family, friends, that this is a booming and growing field. What is your take on kind of where it's headed? Will there be a lot of jobs? Are the jobs all over the place?
Yeah, so I think in security specifically, there's like a huge shortage of talent. Companies are hiring security people like crazy because there's a lot of security issues, and there just aren't enough people that have the skills to be able to fill these roles. There are a lot of people who have some sort of computer science knowledge, but not quite enough to be able to fill these roles. there also just aren't enough students graduating with degrees or some sort of computer science knowledge, or like not enough security knowledge, like I said. And then generally programming wise, even without security, there aren't enough of those either. So I'd say there's a huge shortage, especially in America. I mean, we're having to pull people from other countries just to fill in these shortages. So I would say absolutely, like, there's definitely, if you want to get in on programming, you're interested in it, you will be able to get a job if you get the, you know, some level of knowledge in it, you know, enough to where you can become a full-time programmer. You know, you take the correct courses and you get the skills that this company needs. You just look to see what skills they're looking for. You learn those skills, you'll absolutely get hired. There's a huge shortage, like I said. Not a lot of people have these skills. They're very like, you need these skills. And even if you're not looking at an actual programming job per se, I think every single field, you need to have some sort of programming knowledge or some sort of computer knowledge, because every single field, you're going to use a computer. And, you know, even if you're doing like lab work or some level of research, like especially scientific research, you're going to be having to log this data in some way. And artificial intelligence, big data, like all these kind of buzzwords you're hearing are playing a bigger role in pretty much everything. And computers are being more and more used and used in a bigger way. And like programmers are being hired for these types of positions. But if you can do both, like if you're interested maybe in biology, for example, like you want to pursue a more traditional scientific career, but you also have a programming knowledge, you're even more of a like attractive candidate, because you can do kind of both things. And you can make yourself an even better scientist in that sense, because you'll be able to handle your own data management without having to hire a programmer who can do it for you. Excuse me. And so I think, like, especially with data in like the STEM world, data is like kind of the biggest, I guess in everything data is really important, but since we're talking about STEM, but you know, programming can make data collection and everything so much easier. I think people are more and more realizing this. Companies are more and more realizing this. Yeah, I would definitely say programming is never going to go away. It's only going to get bigger, and especially security. I mean, I'm a little biased because I'm a security engineer, but I think there's a huge shortage. It's only going to get more important. Programming is only going to get more important. I personally think it's one of the best careers you can go into right now, because there's never going to be a hiring shortage as far as I'm concerned in the next 50 years, I would say, at least. Yeah.
Well, that's great. I mean, everybody wants to have a job that's secure and they don't have to worry about
Yeah.
it disappearing for any reason. And computers are everywhere now. I mean, we're on a computer, especially with the pandemic, pushing everybody to use computers even more. Basically, half of our Apple Watches, our phones, our TVs, smart TVs, everything's becoming a computer. So
Yeah.
maybe robots will take over the world.
Yeah, it's a little scary, maybe not a good thing, but
It is an interesting time, but the pandemic has definitely pushed people towards computers even more. And I think our young students, especially the ones watching, are becoming even more proficient in it. And it's really great to be able to see. And so maybe some of them will be able to find their interest there. But you know, we talk about STEM jobs, and there's a lot of encouragement for girls to go into STEM and be exposed to it. How do you feel? Is there a difference in the ability to do your job if you're a girl or a boy? Do you think it's amenable to being a girl and having a family and things like that?
Yeah, so this is something I think I talk a lot about at my workplace, just because where I work is really open to those types of discussions, especially on my team. I went to a traditional four-year university, you know, majored in computer science, and we talked about this quite a lot, as well as like how to kind of manage work life in STEM, as well as like, does it make a difference if you're male versus female? There's a huge gap in terms of just sheer numbers, male versus female, between STEM as well as in computer science. There's very few females in computer science, and then that number gets even lower in security. And so, I mean, I'm the only female dev on my team, which is, it's actually fine. I'm not uncomfortable at all with it. It just kind of is what it is. But I would say the only difficulty comes with just maybe just thinking that you are not as good as you think you are. Like imposter syndrome is something a lot of people talk about. Like thinking you're not in the right place, like you got there just by luck. So I feel like that's something you really have to be aware of and just kind of fight on your own. Just kind of keep saying, no, I'm meant to be here. And then just finding other women, you know, nearby you who are kind of in a similar role. I have a lot of really supportive women that I work with on like neighboring teams or in other positions. That's really nice. And then like outreach things like this is really awesome. And then I would say that also definitely you have to find companies and positions that you know already have established reputations for having good work-life balance, or having the type of work-life balance that you want. So if you go into a company knowing that the work-life balance is not going to work for you, I don't go into that company unless you really think you can change it. You can change the culture. Or if you go into a role and the culture is really bad, then you should, if you can, leave that role or do something about it if you can. So that's what I would say. That's my advice there. Hopefully none of you will be in that situation, and maybe it will change and get better. But my biggest advice would be there are absolutely companies that have amazing work-life balance. And if that's something that's important to you, you can definitely find it, and you shouldn't have any problems. And I don't think there's any real disadvantage to being a woman and having to raise a family or anything like that, if that's like a consideration that you're worried about.
Well, I love that you mentioned you have women on other teams nearby too that can help guide you. I think mentorship and finding people who are in roles that maybe you want to be in someday, or you're you know, working towards, is an awesome thing, especially for students to, you know, most people who are in, you know, older roles are actually that I've met are pretty happy with, oh, you're interested in my job. I'm very honored. Like, let me tell you, let me help you and show you how to get there. And so I always encourage students to try to find a mentor or somebody who can walk them through and help them, give them advice on things that they may be going through that they've gone through in the past. So
yeah, definitely finding mentors both in like internships and that once you become a full-timer, as well as just like if you're in school, either through you know, public school, regular school, or even when you get to college, or even if you're in a training school, you know, whatever it may be, finding someone that has the role that you maybe want one day, or just anyone that you feel like you can connect with. And if they're in the same gender as you and you think that'd be helpful, I'd say that's the number one thing that's helped me get through my career so far. Yeah.
awesome. So again, taking from mainstream media, computer programmers are always inside and, you know, in front of the computer. Do you have any hobbies, or what other things are you doing?
Yeah, so I now live in the PNW, so I'm originally from Texas, so it's been a little bit of a change in like climate, but I actually really like it, and I go hiking a lot. Hiking's like really big up here. And so yeah, that's something I make sure I always do. I make sure I always go outside. With the coronavirus, it's been kind of hard, but you know, I'm trying to make it work. So yeah, hiking is definitely something I do. A lot of my coworkers play video games, so sometimes I like play with them. That's pretty stereotypical of computer engineers though. So see, what else do I do? Yeah, I'm pretty, I try to be pretty outdoorsy. So like kayaking, or I want to go start, I really want to start learning how to like mountain bike and like climb. So I want to start doing that, more of that sort of stuff. Yeah, I'd say hiking is the biggest thing I do though. Yeah, I really like hiking, and it's really fun up here in Seattle. It's not as fun in Texas, so I probably wouldn't do it in Texas. But
Not quite fun. We're getting there. It's getting towards the fall. And you mentioned the pandemic too. How has the pandemic changed your job?
yeah, so I am very fortunate. Microsoft has really not changed at all. We were basically told Microsoft was one of the first companies that told us to work from home. So right when this whole thing started back in early March, and Seattle was also one of the first places hit by the pandemic. So right in March, we were basically sent home, and I've been there since then. And yeah, we can do everything from home. We just we do everything from our computers. I have a work computer that I have with me, and I just do everything from there. So yeah, nothing's really changed. I just have like a little setup, and I just do all my programming from there. So yeah, and then I have meetings with my coworkers. We have sometimes daily meetings, sometimes weekly meetings, depending on who I'm talking to. But yeah, nothing's really changed. I definitely miss my coworkers. I really miss eating lunch with them. It's definitely been rough. That's why I've been trying to get out more. I've been going on walks a lot, like around the neighborhood, and watching a lot of YouTube. And I've been getting more into like nutrition and stuff to try to like feel like that makes me feel better, because it's definitely lonely not seeing my coworkers, because that's something I kind of relied on. But yeah, it hasn't really changed much. I'm fortunate that tech workers, another reason I think having a programming job is really awesome, because your job is very secure in times like this, which we find out. It's since it's not a physical job, you really just need a computer. Anything that affects like the climate or a virus like this, your job is really not affected. So yeah.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a couple questions just about how you become a computer programmer and get into that. But what kind of classes and courses did you take to prepare you for this type of career? What was your favorite class?
Yeah, so like I said, I majored in computer science in college, a traditional four-year university. So mine was definitely more of like traditional path once I did switch into computer science. So one of the first kind of more important classes that you take are Introduction to Programming. So you basically just learn the basics of programming dynamics. So you kind of learn basic data structures, how to design programs, like very simple programs. You learn very simple semantics of programming languages, how they work, how to write them. So that's kind of everyone has to take that, no matter how you learn computer science. If you're in a 2-year kind of course, if you're in like an 18-month boot camp, no matter what, you have to learn like Introduction to Programming. And then you generally need some sort of math fundamentals. So the thing about computer science is if you're taking it from like a 4-year university, it's going to be very theory heavy, because they want you, because it's a science. So it's usually in the natural sciences school. Sometimes it's in the engineering school, but it's really kind of that more traditional college. Like, we want you to know the theories so that you can do research later if you decide to get your master's or your PhD. Whereas some of my coworkers, some other people I know that are computer programmers as a career, do like an 18-month boot camp, or maybe they do like a more traditional or less traditional kind of like trade school kind of thing, where it's like 2 years or 1 year or something like that. And they mostly just focus on the programming. So it's very different. They don't really take any of the theory stuff. So with me, I took like a lot of math courses. So I took like discrete math, probability, things like that, so that I could write algorithms, which is kind of more intense, like ways of writing really complex, like how to manage crazy data and like how to manage software that was going to do complex things, basically. So that's kind of a lot of the stuff you learn in like a 4-year program. And you also have to learn kind of more complex programming knowledge, like more complex data structures, more complex algorithms, things like that. And then you would also take your kind of specialties depending on the university. So I specialized in security. So I took a lot of security classes, but other people that I knew took like human computer interaction. So they more focused on like web development, like building websites, like design, things like that. So it really just depended on what you're interested in. And then if you're in kind of more of like a boot camp, I don't know too much about them, but I know you really focus on the programming. So you might take like a software design type of class, where you really just get heavy on the like learning a bunch of programming languages. There's a ton of different programming languages you can learn. Or you get really heavy on the like, how do you design a website, like how do you design like a database? Like you learn how to create a bunch of different types of things that a company might want. So like a 18-month boot camp is really focused on like, we're going to prepare you for this company, like this career. Whereas like a 4-year institution is really like, we're going to teach you how to do research, basically.
Yeah, so a little different ideas, but it's nice to know that there's a range that you can do, you know, a shorter educational path, 18 months, or you can do a longer one and even possibly pursue it further, like you're saying, a master's or PhD. So it's very much, you know, you can make the pathway, it sounds like, that you want. Um, and okay, so you said you went to 4-year college, but you were talking about earlier about how your job is constantly changing, how you're watching the news, how you're keeping up with different things. How, you know, you learned your skills in college and you learned the things that they taught you, but I'm assuming as the years progress, there's a lot of new things you have to learn and do. And how do you keep up with what is new?
Yeah, so a lot of it I kind of learned by listening to my coworkers. So I pull a lot of, I guess, inspiration from them. So if they're talking about like something interesting, I might go look up what they talked about, because a lot of them they've been in the field for a while. They're brilliant, and they kind of are working alongside me in kind of the same sort of area that I'm working. So I'll get assigned like a specific project. Maybe I don't know a lot about it. There's, you know, current things that are happening in that area that I probably should know about, but are so new that, you know, I don't know where to look. So sometimes I'll ask coworkers about it. Weirdly enough, Twitter is a pretty good place to find security stuff. There's a lot of security knowledge, a lot of security people. They're called information security people on Twitter. I try not to get too much info from there, because you never know what you're looking at, but sometimes that can be a good resource. And then just looking at different types of training materials. So what's it called? The SANS Institute is really good for if you're kind of a beginner and you're kind of not sure what you're interested in. So anyone that's interested in cybersecurity would highly recommend looking at the SANS Institute. There's a lot of like introductory courses on just all different types of computer programming. So sometimes I'll like go back to the foundations, because if I don't understand something in like a research document that I'm looking at, or something my coworker has shown me, or if I'm looking through some code that I'm really supposed to know for the project that I'm looking on, but I'm like, I don't know what this is saying, like I can't read this code, then I'll go back and like learn like, okay, this variable or this, you know, this code is supposed to be doing this. So a lot of times I'll do that, and I'll just like go back to a course. I'll find a course online, I'll just like watch a video on it real fast, and then I'll be like, okay, I understand this now. So a lot of it is that. So I get to kind of relearn a lot of stuff, and I feel like I'm getting smarter when I have to like force myself to learn something, which is pretty fun. But yeah, I would say SANS Institute, my coworkers, Twitter sometimes, going back on foundational courses. Sometimes I'll even pull out my textbooks from college and like look over the parts that I didn't have to do for actual college, but now I'm having to actually look through them. Yeah, there's like so many resources for computer programming, because there's just so many areas. Like honestly, I'll just Google is my best friend. A lot of times I'll just like Google like a specific word and like just look at the first thing. Yeah. And then Microsoft, the company I work for, has a lot of training resources, like free training resources that I will use a lot of the time too.
Yeah. Awesome. And in your job, do you work with other people, or do you normally work by yourself and then you have a team?
Yeah, so it depends on the project. I definitely have had projects where I work mostly alone, but I usually ask to work with other people because I am relatively new and I like working with other people. So, and I find that I learn more when I'm paired with someone who's a little more senior than me, and I kind of just like that. So I'll usually work with a couple other people. I usually have my very own like my work is carved out for me, like I own a specific thing, but then someone will be working on something that's somewhat related to what I'm doing, so I can ask them questions. And then I think probably the biggest thing that you have to be able to do as a software engineer is ask questions, even if they're really stupid. You can't get stuck on something. If you get stuck on something, you should just ask, because you might feel really dumb, but if you don't ask, you're gonna just be stuck on it. And so I think that's like one of the biggest things that I've learned as like a relatively new software engineer, is just to ask, even if I feel really dumb for asking it. So if I don't understand a piece of code and Googling is not getting me anywhere, then I'll just ask. And that's kind of one of the reasons I like working on something like somewhat similar to what someone else is working on. And yeah, even if I'm working on something that is like totally my own thing, totally my own project, which definitely has happened, and I'm totally fine with it. But I still find time to make sure I'm still kind of working with my coworkers, in the sense that I just like ask them questions, like will learn things. Like Microsoft, and especially my team, really encourages learning things outside of what you're currently doing. So we have like days of learning and all sorts of like time that we can like use to learn other things. And so I'll just like use that time to like ask my coworkers like, hey, you know, what about this thing? And I've even have like kind of mentors on the team that will kind of just like go off on tangents and like teach me things that I didn't even ask. And they'll kind of just teach me like random stuff about security or random stuff about computer programming, which is really awesome. So I always feel like I'm not just like stuck or just learning like one thing, which is really cool. Yeah, so I definitely feel like I'm always working with people, even if my project's only me.
That's awesome. And I know, so you work for Microsoft and then you work in a company. Is that how most computer programmers work, or are there different types of jobs where they may be working on their own, or what other are the big companies?
Yeah, so my team is about, how many people are on my team? Like 8 people on my team. And I would say that is, I would say that's somewhat normal. For Microsoft, I think it really depends on what your project is. I've met some people, even just at Microsoft, some people have really large teams, some people are really small teams, some people are like kind of more alone. Really depends. And then it depends on if you work for a really big company, a really small company. If you work for a startup, if you work for a startup, you're kind of just working for that startup, so the whole startup is like your team. If you're a freelancer, you're just working for yourself. So it really depends. Yeah, definitely don't have a good answer for that. There's so many companies out there.
Great. There's all different types of options.
Yeah, exactly.
But people like, you know, they can choose to work in a company in these big groups. They can choose to do it on their own, like freelancing. They can do startups, which are very exciting and, you know, kind of striking out on your own.
Yeah.
And so, no, that's a perfect answer. And kind of what is the salary range of computer programmers? And is it, you know, just simply a salary? Is it freelancers clearly make off of how many projects they're doing separately? But
Yeah, so this is definitely one of the big draws for programming. I would say generally the range, it really depends on, I'd say the biggest defining factor is where you live, so what state you're in, and then what city you're in. I would say, just talking to my friends, and then me, myself, kind of asked around a bit, I would say generally it's going to be, generally you're looking at like 80 to 150 K would be the range, entry level. And of course, this really depends. Yeah, your first year. And of course, this definitely depends on like where you're living. So like Texas is going to be very different than Seattle. Like Seattle's going to be quite a bit higher than Texas, for example. And then you also, it changes depending on what the benefits are and what the stocks are. But I would say my advice would be, like, if you're starting out, I would definitely try to aim for 6 figures if you can. And it's going to probably go up as like once all of you, everyone watching this is going into the workforce, it'll probably be much higher than that because it's only going up and up and up. Even since I started a year ago, people that are getting hired now are making, I don't know what the case is for Microsoft specifically, but even people getting hired now are making a bunch of different companies are probably making more entry level just in the 1 year of like inflation and programming and stuff. So yeah.
Well, for any middle school kids, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
I used to not know what any of those numbers meant, but that is awesome that you live the life that you hopefully want to live. And we talked about the pandemic a little affecting your job. You said it hadn't changed much. Is your job one that would be really affected by change in the economy or different things like that?
Yeah, so that's one thing I've really been kind of tracking a bit. And I would say that kind of surprising that all the tech companies seem to be doing relatively better in this pandemic. Like if you look at the stocks, they seem to be doing well, like going up, going down a little bit, going up, but like not tanking or anything like that. So in terms of that, they seem to be doing just fine. Everyone seems to think there's going to be like this giant tech bubble. I'm not that worried about it. Because even if it does happen, I don't think it'll lead to any like layoffs or anything like that. I will say though that like with any big company in tech or not, you always do run the risk of like a lot of people work for the company, so you never know like if something does happen, it will, just because it's a lot of people in general, if something does happen, it's going to be a lot of people that are affected, just sheer probability wise. Just like if it's a startup, if a startup goes bankrupt, everyone's, going to be affected. Whereas if it's like a big company, it's a big amount of people that are going to be affected. So I just kind of think about it that way. So just like, yeah, when you're making a decision, just kind of think about it that way. Like, how stable is this company? How long have they been around? Like, how do they do in bull markets versus like, better markets, that sort of thing. But tech seems to be doing pretty good. It doesn't seem to be hitting any like major hurdles. So yeah, I think it's a really good place to be, especially security, major shortages. Lots of people want to hire security people. I think it's a great place to be. I think there's a lot of like challenges and room for improvement and room for growth and really good salaries. And we definitely need a lot of people. We need help, especially America. America needs help. We need a lot of security help.
Oh no. So for any students who might be interested in this field, just this little kind of a last question, what advice would you have for them?
Yeah, so if you're interested in programming, I would say, again, like curiosity is really, I think, the driver. And I think that's how I got into it. That's how a lot of people I know into programming. If you have a computer, that's awesome. Like just like kind of mess around with things on your computer, like pull up your command prompts and just kind of do things on it, like look up tutorials on how to create websites, look up, if you're interested in the security space, look up how to, maybe like a fake website. There's lots of fake websites you can like practice kind of like breaking into. There's all sorts of really cool tutorials online, like videos of people just kind of hacking into things. And it's really fun. Like definitely find your niche. There's so many like areas in computer science that you can kind of fall into. So even if you don't particularly love like making websites, I thought I wanted to be a web developer when I first got into computer science. And then I did it for a little bit and realized I didn't really like it. And that's how I fell into security. I met some people in security and they were really cool. And so I kind of started doing that sort of stuff and I really liked it more. And so that's how I fell into that, is again, just kind of following people, making friends and following my curiosity. So that would be my advice. And then if you don't have a computer, I would say, go to the library, talk to your teachers that are in, like your math and science teachers. If you have a computer science class in middle school or in high school, like definitely take them. And then I would say, even if you don't plan on pursuing a career in computer science, it 100% will be the most important skill you can have, other than basic math, basic English, you know, speaking, computer science, programming, you need to know how it is so important. And like we are in trouble, like, and I don't say that to sound dramatic, but our privacy and our security is in trouble, especially in America. And we have to have kids and students that are smart and that know this stuff, because we are definitely falling behind in our math and our science and our programming, and we need kids to be able to like know this stuff and be really good at it. So like definitely take computer programming, even if you don't plan on pursuing it as a career, because it will definitely help you out in any career you are in. It will be a skill that is highly sought after. It will help you in anything that you're doing. It will supplement any field you're in. You will make extra money just by knowing to do it. Like, trust me, you will. Someone will know that you know how to do it, and they'll be like, "We're going to give you a pay raise." No, I'm just kidding. That might not happen, but it will definitely help you out, and it will change the way your brain works as well. So before I did computer science, I wasn't quite as like a logical thinker. I thought in of a different way. And then once I started doing programming, you really do think about things differently. You learn differently. It's really challenging, challenges the way you think. And so I think it's a really worthwhile skill to have. And I think it's really enjoyable too, and it'll boost your confidence. And so that's kind of what I have to say about it. I think it's really fun, and there's a lot of career opportunity out there for it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us. For my students who are watching, remember that once you watch the lesson as well, then fill out the survey to show us that you did get to watch the interview and the lesson, and make sure you get your credit. And there'll also be some other resources just for online things you can do and activities that we'll be posting in the description of the video and on our website as well. So thank you for joining us, Hayley, and for sharing with our students about everything, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hope that was helpful.